John Henson has been in the mortgage industry for over 15 years in various roles. John is currently the head of legal and compliance at consumeraffairs.com. Prior to joining consumeraffairs.com in January, John spent 6 years at LendingTree in various roles from compliance, interim general counsel, and working on the business side of the vertical as well. We're so happy to have you here with us today, John. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me, Ron. I'm really looking forward to it.
Great, great. So we're going to just dive in because the fireside chats have been really great and we've been getting some really good information. So I want to just dive right on in. So one of the questions that has been kind of like top of mind as we've been talking with everyone is the theme around fair lending. So we're approaching 2 months under this current administration, and we know that the CFPB is focusing on oversight and enforcement as it applies to equity, racial equity. It seems pretty safe to say that fair lending and ENICOA will be aggressively enforced. So how do you ensure that equity is occurring within your organization and instances of disparate impact are not occurring?
Yeah, and I think you really hit the nail on the head there, and that the current administration is definitely going to make that a priority with their appointments. You can already seen that. I will also say that I think that lucky for me, we're just on the marketing side, so we're not actually lending money. However, that doesn't absolve us of fair lending and ENICOA responsibilities, right? In fact, we're actually probably at a higher risk of that than some of our lender network partners. Our lender and network partners are going to be responsible for the traffic that we drive to them, and therefore we're responsible for that traffic. And we need to make sure that we're driving that traffic in a responsible and equitable way. And so saying all that, from a marketing perspective, that fair lending has to be top of mind. And for us, and that's both for Consumer Affairs and previously at LendingTree as well, like that starts with extremely clear policies, extremely clear procedures, and education of the marketing and the product teams, and how we go about building marketing platforms and how we go about building marketing campaigns. And whether that's going to be through Facebook or Google ads or search ads, like we have to be making sure that we are setting the policies and procedures, and we have those in place so that we can go back and say, hey, the reason that Rhonda got this ad and the reason that John got the other ad are based on X, Y, and Z, which cannot be obviously prohibited reasons, right? Like we have to be able to, they have to be facially, they have to be neutral reasons. But that doesn't mean we can't target Rhonda differently than we target John, because John lives in Alabama and Rhonda lives in New York or wherever. So, but we have to make sure that it's not because Rhonda's a woman and John's a man. And I think what happens, a lot of marketers and product people who want, or analytics people who are like, hey, I've got all this data. Let's go and we can move all these levers and change all these levers, and we can show different ads to this person, different ads to this person. And while that's all great and it's fun and they love to do that, like unless they know what levers they can and cannot pull, I think you're going to run some risk there. And not just on a marketing side, but also from in the case of LendingTree and Consumer Affairs, a matching side. Like we need to be able to say, why did Rhonda get matched with A, B, and C lenders and John got matched with X, Y, and Z lenders, right? So what's that algorithm and how is that based as well? I'm sorry, that was a very long answer, but.
No, that's great information. And I think that, one of the things that has kind of come to the surface repeatedly is the importance around education of the marketing team, education of, in the case of mortgage companies, the loan origination folks. So, how often and do you have kind of a cadence in which you are trying to make sure that folks are staying aware? Is this like an annual training? Do you go so far as trends develop and occur within the regulations? Are you constantly retraining? Do you feel like training is becoming kind of the thing as we're going through the course of the year?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I look at it really from um, two ways. There's formal training
Mhm.
and there's communication. And formal training, we do it annually. We do it with new hires. So, you have that cadence, and
Right.
depending on what it is, whether it's truth in lending advertising regulations, whether it's ECOA fair lending regulations, we have a cadence for those. But the other thing that's most important is that communication, and you have to constantly be communicating with the team so that they understand, A, our compliance and legal team knows what they're talking about, right? B, that they're here to help us. And, my general rule of communication is by the time I'm tired of saying it, someone's just now hearing it.
Absolutely.
So I do continue to beat the same drum over and over and over. And I think that that's very helpful. It's not helpful for a legal and compliance team to send out one email to say, don't do X, Y, and Z, and then wash their hands that they've done it, right? Because that may be sufficient to cover legal and compliance, but it's not helpful to the business. And that's the point that we really want to do is become really helpful partners to the business.
Yeah, I always say the trusted advisor is your
Yep.
compliance team, and that's definitely critical. They're critical
Yep.
to the business, but also the things that the compliance team does to make sure that the business is protected. And the marketing team having that trust and that relationship is very critical. And in terms of making sure that those things are taking place, how do you ensure not enforcement, but auditing has taken place that kind of reinforces that the compliance is actually occurring? I think that as, groups get larger and larger and business starts to grow and evolve, and it's been a very busy year in the industry. How do you track and audit to make sure that everything is maintaining compliance?
Yeah, you have to have a centralized, what I call intake function, right? You have to be able to put the proposed marketing pieces through that centralized input so it all goes here, right? And so that when we know that if marketing is going out into the world and it hasn't been brought into that function, like someone is doing something wrong and we need to be able to address that, right? And if we catch it on the front end, it cuts down a lot of the audit on the back end, right? So, and our marketing partners think, well, we just move way too fast. We move way too fast. Well, that's not necessarily true. And all of us who have been doing this a while, it doesn't take us nearly as long to review a piece of marketing as they would like to think it. That we're not going to slow them down sufficiently, right? So you get to where you know what you're looking for, right? So that's very helpful. Also, working with marketing for them to understand, again, how this is beneficial. And I always explain to them, look, I would much rather you have to go back and change this before it goes live than for you to roll it out and it be a successful ad campaign, right? But then we have to take it down because it's not compliant, right? So that also avoids the labeling of legal compliance as the profit prevention department, right? So we want to make sure that we're catching that stuff on the front end, and so it's not detrimental to the business if we have to pull it down for some reason.
Great, great. And I guess one of the other questions, I know that there's always so many regulations, whether it's coming from the federal or from the state level. How can the industry and the states or the feds, how can everyone start working a little bit closer together? Or do you even think that there is an issue where maybe they aren't working, they can work together to get people to a better place from a compliance standpoint?
Yeah, and I think that that's what's really interesting about the last few places I've worked from a marketing perspective. It's not hard to set up a mortgage marketing site, right? Like you can go buy a domain, you can put a beautiful little logos on there, and you can build a form, and it's not super hard. The problem is people want to go throw those up and they don't want to take the time to understand the regulations and the regulators. And you've got to work closely with your regulators. The first time you speak to a regulator should not be in response to a CID, right? That is not ideal.
Yeah.
And I don't think that people that are just pure marketers understand the importance of that. The other thing that I would say is that because of the growth of financial services marketing online over the last, let's say, 5 to 10 years, you're getting a lot of people coming in from other industries, travel, retail. We're not selling t-shirts here, right? There's rules and there's regulations, and
Absolutely.
what worked for you at, t-shirts.com isn't going to work for you at mortgage.com, and you need to figure out what those guardrails are. And again, that's where legal and compliance can come in, help with the training, help with that communication, and say, look, these are some of the things you have to think about there.
Wonderful. Well, just goes to show how important compliance is to the industry as a whole. And thank you so much for taking the time out to join us today for our fireside chat. And I'm really glad that you were able to share some information from a marketing perspective. That's always really critical for folks to get that information as well. So thank you so much for joining us today, John.
Thank you, Rhonda, and thank you for the work you've done for the industry over the years too. We really appreciate the hard work you've done.
Appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you.